Thomas. Welcome to Career Conversations. Thank you for joining us today. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me on such a lovely podcast. A little bit about myself. I'm going to try and run you through 16 years of iGaming experience. I started off when I got to know you at Betfair, right? I think that was right off in 2009. After a while there, I went to Tipico where I was there for 7 years, then moved to the MGA for a year, a little bit of consultancy, worked with a slots operator, Play and Go, and then started doing a lot of startups, building startups, operational startups around technology and concepts and technology concepts, and spent the last 2 to 3 years building crypto casino operations and other sorts of operations in e-commerce, my own business, and that's pretty much what I've done over the past 16 years.
Wow, okay. All right. So 16 years is a long time. You've got a lot of experience and you've held different roles in your time. So, can you give me your highlight roles? What would they be?
I think one of my biggest successes was when I started the employer branding scene within the industry. I think at the time that was pretty much inexistent. I remember going to the CEO I had at the time, Jan Bolt, who was an exceptional CEO at Tipico. And I told him, Jan, would you give me a budget to actually start an employer branding department? And he looked at me like I was mad. This was unheard of in the industry at the time. And I told him, no, I'm not. I'm not that mad. And I actually want to push forward this project because I believe the only way we can become a hugely successful company is by getting the best talent. I mean, you're only as good as your people, right? So I did that unofficially for quite a few years. I think about it was 3 or 4 years. Later on, from my stint at Tipico, we actually officialized the department, the role, the whole function, and we got quite a few awards for that. And we set an industry standard back then. And then you notice you're doing something right because all the other big guns started implementing employer branding roles in their company and pretty much copying the same kind of format we had at the time. So I said, okay, we're on the right track with that. So that was a pretty big achievement at the time. And then I kept on doing a couple of freelancing roles in terms of employer branding. And another part of my career, which I'm really fond of, was operations management. I did a lot of different operations, from being part of a wider operations team in a big company, as well as building the operations bottom up for startups and technology people had a concept in mind, and I would build it bottom up for them. And yeah, those are two areas which I pretty much kind of like to speak about. And I guess the way forward in my career is trying to put the two together, just operations and human resources. Perhaps I didn't focus too much on human resources as a main role for me throughout my time, but that's something perhaps which I'm looking into right now.
Okay, interesting. So it seems to me like you're an owner, you take a project and run with it. Let's go back to the employer branding part, because you said that you asked for a budget. What was the budget for?
Yeah, so essentially I was, at the time when I started this off, I was building a customer support department, and it was quite a big one. I was taking care of the HR function within the support department because that particular department was bigger than half the company at the time. And I kind of figured out, and I had been reading a lot during my studies about the war of talent at the time. It used to be called the war of talent. And I figured out that we need to push on three concepts. We need to push on the work environment. We need to push on why Malta is the place to be, which kind of just should have been done by government at the time. But I wanted to replace that because it's pointless waiting for other entities to do this stuff for you. And I wanted to promote the digital opportunity environment we were creating. So it was sort of all my employer brands were kind of based on these three pillars. And it doesn't come out of nothing. You need to promote it. You need to create really interesting artwork, visuals, audio visuals. At the time, I had created a cartoon to engage people a bit more, something which was not done at the time. For people who never heard of the brand, you need to create a bit of a brand perception in no time. So you need to see when the brand started, or which date it started on, where it was then, where we are now, what the opportunities are for you, what the brand gives you, where it takes you, etc., etc., etc. So there was a lot of things one had to cover, from digital creations, artistic creations, and marketing across different channels, newspapers, offline media, career conventions, verts online and offline, then certain going on social media, etc., etc., and the list goes on and on and on. And that's when we started to see that the level of talent at the time improved drastically. So rather than getting people randomly applying, we're getting people who have been in the industry for X amount of years or coming from sister industries, wanting to be part of this brand which we had created. Yeah. And that's why we needed money. And you need quite a bit of money.
Yes, it sounds like it, especially with all the advertising you kind of needed to do as well. Okay, so.
But by the way, what worked then won't work now. It was a decade ago. So employer
Okay, 'cause
branding version 1.1 is probably 1.3 or 1.4 now.
you said that you were hiring.
Right.
So maybe you can tell us a bit like how to build a high performance team. Where do you start? What do you look for?
Okay, so yes, essentially I've been hiring people for 15 years. Right? Coincidentally, the other day, I had a meeting very close to one of the first companies I worked at. And when I was just outside, I saw the people I had employed there that they happened to be outside passing by, and I kind of called two of them, and I'm like, "Hey, you guys are still here?" Like, so that's great. I'm sure their roles have changed and they've evolved, etc., etc. But what I particularly look for in people when hiring teams, whether they're CS teams, whether they're operational units, like I like to call them, because I don't just like to employ people to do a mundane role. I want to create a role where they would be involved in numerous parts of an operation unit, with having ownership, having responsibility, having a path for growth. And that, I think, is the most important thing, because that keeps them there, that keeps them interested, that keeps them wanting to push forward, and they become your evangelists eventually, your brand evangelists. But when building a very successful team, I look for people who have passion to drive. They're a bit entrepreneurial, because this gives them the energy to push things forward and to challenge the very cliche kind of word statement, status quo. But if used in the right way, yes, it can be challenged, and there are a lot of these people. One can argue, would you lose these people if they're very entrepreneurial? Well, not if you give them the right platform for them to thrive and grow, sort of growing and sort of keep on progressing. Then yes, many companies sometimes feel that we can't have so many progressive people because they're going to kind of outperform other people. But that's a completely different discussion. And so I look for people with entrepreneurial mindsets, loyal people, people with a very good logical background. They don't necessarily have to be people with a lot of experience in the subject matter. I'm always speaking, for example, if we're creating roles for entry level or CS or subjects where one could learn, right? I look more at the attributes of the person, at his approach, at his gesticulations, at the way he thinks, at the way he puts things together, his logic behind solving a problem, or his likes and dislikes, and who, if he had to be in my seat, who he would employ and why, this kind of logic of his way or her way of thinking. And that's what I look out for, because at the end of the day, a subject matter can be taught, and if you're patient enough, people learn. In fact, I was speaking to a games aggregator owner a couple of weeks ago and said, listen, I recruited the COO and the CEO who were from a complete different industry, but together with them, I wanted to wait so they learn, and I had the time and patience to do so. And once they learned, they were the right people I wanted, because I did not employ them sort of based on the subject matter. And this was for a COO and CEO. I did not base this on a subject matter, but I based this on everything else. So that's what I look for. And I think that is quite good, because most of the teams I employed in different companies are mostly still together, unless there was something beyond their control. That's, I don't know, some companies kind of dismantle departments and take them to other countries and this and that, many other reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Is it possible for you to elaborate a bit more on, like, when you were hiring for the role, like you mentioned that it would be a mix of 3 different departments?
Which
So
part
for
exactly?
example, you were hiring someone who would be responsible for CS, for payments, and for fraud.
Right. So okay. So there were instances where the nature of the work, like for example at Thunderbro, I was asked to create the operations team, right? And I built it bottom up. And what I did there, together with Gary, who was the CTO there, I put more of an operational unit rather than just a CS team. And as I explained before, the scope of this is a wider one. And people in that team were very good. Most of them happened to know trading. They were supporting customers. They were detecting anything to do which was not right in terms of pattern and trading. Kind of, let's say, not fraud, but yeah, something on those lines, because we tend to call them frauds in gaming, but it's a bit different here.
Okay.
They were helping on chargebacks. They were helping on being an incubator in terms of feedback for marketing, product, tech, competitor analysis. So building an operational unit rather than just, a single isolated department gives you more room to build on. It creates a better framework and an easier way to grow and develop an operational unit completely, right? And it's easier to grow into something rather than try to change it later.
That's so interesting. I think it's great because it also gave the people that you trained more responsibility, right? So in a way,
it did.
The customer just had to deal with like one person and it was resolved. And they learned more and they felt like they were more in control because they could resolve matters rather than escalate or pass them on.
It did. One thing I like to always say about that team, when we started off this operational unit, the decisions that were being taken by the CEO at the time. Now, given this is a startup, obviously the CEO, either the guys on top have to take certain decisions. But as the operation grew, as the organization grew, those decisions being taken by the CEO were being taken care of by this team 4 or 5 months down the line. So there's ownership, there's responsibility, there's trust, and all of this, right? So yeah. So
okay. So we've spoken about recruitment. What about CVs, right? What do you look out for when you're looking at CVs?
Right. So potentially I may be incredibly different from everyone or most of the people out there, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, when dealing with different HR people and departments, unless they see that the applicant has the same title role 3 times in a row on a CV or twice in a row on a CV, then the applicant isn't the right applicant. In my case, the applicant had to have the same thing 3 times in a row. I would say that applicant could potentially be a fit, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for progression in his CV. I'm looking for interesting he's done. I'm looking for at different attributes that he may bring or she may bring from different roles. Ideally, I enjoy as well even employing candidates who come from a completely different industry, because what tends to happen many a time is when you employ people coming from another company within the same industry, even pretty much within the same role, first of all, they're going to start benchmarking against their best previous opportunity they had before. Secondly, they get a bit stagnated trying to implement what they did before within the next company. And every company, even if you had to replicate the same department within the same company a few months down the line, it's going to be different, because a department, company, an organization, a team is a living, growing thing. And it just keeps changing. If it's not, you have a problem. Completely. So it's impossible to replicate stuff you've done before, you've done previously, you've done in a different time era, you've done in a different dynamic into another place, because people are different. We're made out of 1 million different components, and we're so different, and you can't put them together in the same way you put them before. It just doesn't work. Yes, it creates a lot of nostalgia for people and remembering in the past and different places they've worked with and different teams they were part of. I completely understand that. We all get it from time to time. I also get it when I remember the time we were at Bedford 15, 16 years ago. How fun it used to be, go try to implement the same things that now and then. And, like people would think you're living in 1955, so.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let's move on to fiat and crypto, right? Because you've worked in both. What tips would you give someone starting in crypto operations for the first time?
Okay, so if they're coming from fiat, they need to stop for 5 seconds and completely start to invest in understanding a crypto audience and how they consume the product. That is the key question and key answer. That is it. If you don't, you're just calling yourself for failure, because what people tend to do is they have a fiat product and they just try to convert it into a crypto product. And we've spoken about this before, and I've told you, like, crypto and fiat just sound like having football, European football and American football. They're both called football. They're both played on playing fields. They both have players attacking to either side. They're both using the ball, but the mechanics, the size of the ball, the shape of the ball, the speed of the game, the whole macro environment around the game, the timings, the duration, blah, 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 is all different, right? So it's as similar, but as different. A crypto audience is completely different when it consumes the product, how long they're capable of waiting, this registration process, the sign-up process, the stages, the steps, the kind of waiting time they would allow you to kind of provide them with. That's key. One of the key factors, for example, in a crypto audience, if they request a withdrawal and the withdrawal is not with them within 7 to 10 minutes, you're done. You're completely done, because they want everything instant. It's a younger audience. It's a savvier audience. It's an impatient audience. They want everything right here, right now. So so given that this is the result that is needed, you need to work it backwards. Like with anything else I do in operation, first I try to get a result that is wished for, right? So what do we want to achieve in a product? In a project. They give you the result and try to work it backwards. Most of the time, they don't know what the result is. Like, when you speak to owners, okay, what do you want to achieve? You know what you want to achieve, and they struggle to say what they want to achieve. So that's the biggest issue. So once you know, and we know now what the audience wants, you need to work it backward. So when you work it backwards, you just realize that the mechanics are completely different. Why? Because if the waiting time has to be like 2% of what the regular waiting time is, the B2B providers, the service they give, the checking when you have games, the payout methods, the quickness, the internal kind of rapidity of checks and this and that all has to change. Otherwise, you're not going to end there on time. You know, if you get a request and it's not serviced and like it's in a queue and you're at it after 45 minutes, 1 hour, you've already lost a client. We're thinking about B2C clients, right? So just for clarity. So at the end of it all, you know, it all depends on the mechanics of servicing a particular clientele, and the crypto audience is completely different. So obviously, try to work it backwards, have the whole macro environment change, and that is as different as it gets. And I mean, I can only explain this in a nutshell in a few minutes here, but over the past 3 years, I've been working on this, building teams around it, helping the product teams with feedback around this kind of service we need to give. And some get it, some don't. And some are just not set up for it, although they try to get there.
Okay, interesting. So let's move on to emerging trends. From your perspective, what are some of the key emerging trends in HR or operations management?
Okay, so this is a very cool question, because as you know, I had also done some other podcasts. I think this was in 2019-20, where I had also started to envisage a bit of AI in employer branding at the time, but I think the timing was not right. It was way ahead of where I should have been. And there are 2 layers I've been speaking about lately, where I want to get involved in really, really deeply now. That is the side of operations and HR. And the way it always happened, kind of HR came under my operational stance, which was a wrong thing for me to do, because they are 2 separate they're equally as important and very 2 separate subjects. And going forward, I'm kind of leaning this out and wanting to treat both areas differently and equally. However, there is one layer I'm seeing coming closer and I'm getting really involved in terms of learning and getting into, and that's the AI side of things. And kind of this is a bit obvious now these days because everything has become AI. But the reality is AI in these areas is only at a helpful stage. and not a detrimental stage. And people are using it in different ways. And some teams are in for it, some teams aren't, some companies are ready for it, some companies are not ready for it. Like, for example, how are we using AI in the HR world today? I mean, when it comes to recruiting, onboarding, pieces of payroll, employee performance management, spotting out trends and employee development, employee service. So these kind of things, they're kind of a help, but it's not there to kind of it's not yet ready to revolutionize the whole area. You know what I mean? So like most common practices are the screening of CVs, automations of interviews, generating job descriptions and benchmarking salaries and brackets, But yet again, it's very human aided. So there's not much which is so revolutionary yet, although there's a lot of digital assistance, of course. And I believe, just like there is a lot of this help on the HR side of things and on the operation side of things, we need to come to a point where the AI side of things won't be just a helpful tool in certain fragments of a function, but they will become the base layer. And that's what I'm getting myself into at the moment, wanting to be part of, particularly going forward in the future, of being sort of ahead of this trend as I was before, but I want to really understand how to bring the most out of AI within these two areas, which kind of go hand in hand with operations and the human resources side of things. And that's what I'm really into right now in terms of kind of upcoming trends. Yes, of course, then there are other trends, kind of games, the speed of the games, etc., etc. But that's beyond this area I just spoken about. And I'd like to focus on this area: HR operations, well-being of employees, monitoring workloads. This has not been introduced as yet as a paid function, but I'm definitely more than sure that this will be the next step. And I think one of the areas I've been reflecting on over the past months is, should I perhaps be tapping into these areas myself? And I'm trying to work on these areas as well. Yeah, I really believe in this, and that's really and truly, that's the way forward.
A very interesting topic. So thanks for that. We've gotten to the last question now. So what's the one thing you've learned in the past 15 years that you wish you'd known from the start? 16 years, I guess.
Very good question. I think the one thing that comes to mind at this point right now is that if you're an operational person, you need to be aware that operations kind of tend to include everything for some people and very few for another set of people. And at times I've worked in places where everything falls under operations. This is operation. This is operation. When everything goes right, it's not operation. When everything goes wrong, this is operation. Right. Everything can be operations. Depends how you look at it. Right. So, of course, there are areas which are very specific, but yeah, it's very good that anyone getting into operations kind of choose your side of operations, choose a subject, and stick to it. And operations is not an easy role to be in. It's kind of the dirty job. It's kind of a playmaker in a football team. You kind of have to do a lot of weaving through the middle of the pitch and then pass the ball to the striker, and the striker goes, and everyone goes, yeah, the striker's good. Yeah. Well done. So it's a bit like that. You have to deal with all the wind and the rain and all that.
Okay. What you're trying to say is that from past experience, now you know that whatever you're going to do, you're going to focus on something, whether it's HR or operations and stick to it.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to do real operations, it's not really about job descriptions. In operations, you need to get your hands dirty and pretty much do whatever is needed to join the bridges and get everything flowing, right? So that's pretty much it. So and that's why this happens, and it's kind of it's a bit of a natural stance, because operations is all about anticipating growth, anticipating company needs, anticipating what's not working, and kind of build those bridges for it to work naturally. And when everything is working as it's supposed to be, you probably won't hear any problems, but that's when you know it's working properly.
Excellent. Okay, Thomas. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.